Hello and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program, and welcome to a new series that I'm calling Kerbal Exploration Program, or KXP for short. Because of our newfound ability to have ultra quality graphics and smooth performance, we have decided that our next series is going to focus on exploration. We're going to visit every single planet and we're going to try to set up some sort of base there. That seems to be a common goal, and I think we're going to make an attempt at that ourselves. And in doing so, we're using a handful of mods to supplement that. One of which, the most important of which, being the Unkerballed Start, which is basically the equivalent to probes before crewed. But I'll be getting into all the mods that this is going to be utilizing soon enough. Let's go ahead and start a new game. So we are going to name this KXP. Once again, that's the Kerbal Exploration Program. And we're going to put 01, just in case we want to do another season of this. Also, including numbers in your save file is helpful to differentiate between the two, or between multiples of them, so it's always handy. We're also going to be utilizing the mod that I had created. A user on Reddit had created these flags and allowed me to put them up on CCAN. They were previously known as NG's flags, but you can now find them under the name of Minimalist Kerbal System Flags for every body. You can find that on CCAN. It's just a flag pack, so it should be adaptable with everything. So we're just going to use the Kerbal flag for now, because we are on Kerbal, or on Kerbin, excuse me. So I'm going to go through all the setting changes. Mainly on the main setting, we turn our missing crew off so they will stay missing, and the Kerbals will level up immediately, because I feel like that's a little more realistic. Normally we have on always allow action groups, but we're not going to include that this time because we normally have it on because we are doing POV, and you kind of need action groups when you're in the probe control room. Next up, we are going to just allow basically all the contracts. We have several contract packs, and we want to make sure that we have everything available to us, because we don't always have to take them, but we like having all the options. Some of the big ones that we're going to have to end up doing is the remote tech contracts, which is going to allow us to have better communications, or just communications at all, with our probes. And we're also going to be doing some plane contracts, because I think that'll be fun. Here we are on the crew light. We're turning on that we always have light on EVA. I think that's useful. We're going to skip ahead through a few of them. Janitor's Closet, we want to enable the button to let us know. And on Kerbal Contracts, we want to allow both the remote tech ground stations as well as the ComNet ground stations. This is going to help us out and further improve our network. For those who may not know, and just very briefly, remote tech is a very realistic satellite communications network mod. So here we are on the crash simulation mod, and we're just going to turn its construction or its simulation cost completely down. We can't turn it off completely, so it's going to be at 25%. But we're going to be using the simulation a lot, and we're going to be using it to go to some fairly far places. So if we keep the price modifier where it's at, we could very quickly go broke. Alright, here we are now at research bodies, which is the last of the settings we're going to be really focusing on. And this mod is another huge one, in that basically it makes it so you don't know where certain planetary bodies are. The very basic, you only know of the Sun, Kerbin, and your Mun. But we're going to take the next step up that allows us to see Minmus as well, because I think it's only fair. But for everything else in the Kerbal system, we're going to have to research and discover for ourselves. I think that's a pretty useful and challenging goal in an exploration-based playthrough. So that wraps up for all of our settings. So we're going to change that. And yeah, I think we're ready to get started. This is going to be a different playthrough than what we're familiar with, even with our Escaping Kerbin series, because of the specific mods we're using. It's going to challenge us in different ways. Here we are, just showing you that I'm not changing any of the remote tech settings. Everything is left as is. as the mod developer intended. For some reason in this playthrough, my camera on the KSC likes to start off facing the opposite direction. I'm not sure why. Very weird. So anyways, like I mentioned, we have 4 main mods that are kind of like building up our playthrough, and that is Unkerballed Start, Strategia, Research Buddies, and Remote Tech. So Unkerballed Start is an equivalent to the Probed Before Crew mod, where it puts the crew capsule down the research tree. But as you see here, it does a full overhaul of the research tree. This isn't your community research tree that you're used to. See, for 90 points of science, the Mach 1 command capsule is all the way down this tech tree right here. You have to really work to get your Kerbals up in space. A little bit cheaper, you can get these Soviet-style, capsules, but they don't last as long. They quickly get outdated by things like the Mach 1-3. And the other thing I like about this is that it puts certain things like the Alcor pod in places that it should be. It never really made sense to me that you could unlock the Alcor pod before the Hitchhiker can in the regular community tech tree. So I appreciate that it's pushed back a little bit and made it into a sensible place where it is now. But anyways, getting ahead of ourselves, right now all we have access to is the Probodobodine Putnik, a small little mite SRB, and a thermometer for science. It's going to take a little bit before we can unlock liquid fuel engines, and we don't unlock the ant and the spider till here, and we don't even get the Terrier engine after that node. We have to go all the way up here to the propulsion systems, and so we're going to have to really work to get our agency to space, to the orbit, to the Mun, beyond. This tech tree is a little intimidating, but I am excited to tackle it. Alright, coming back, the next mod we're going to be looking at is Strategia, and that revamps how your administration building handles the strategy programs. So as you see here, each one of our Kerbals specializes in a different thing, and we're going to be using these to kind of guide our playthrough. So like this strategy is all about probes, where you have to land 3 of them on the Mun. We did this program in our previous series. I believe that was the KXP POV series that had that. We explained it in more detail over there, and we'll explain it a little bit more detail as we go on soon enough when we start using it. But for now, I'm just going to leave it at that. It's kind of programs to guide our progress. So here we are looking at the new building, the observatory, and that's from the research body. And we can't actually access it because we need to upgrade our tracking station first. So we're going to come in here into our tracking station to kind of show you what we're looking at. And currently what we're looking at is a gorgeous volumetric cloud Kerbin. Let's see, we can see the Mun, and we can see Minmus. We have a little bit of a skybox, which is nice. And we have Kerbal, the sun. But beyond that, we are alone. This is very unsettling to the Kerbals. So they created the space station and the exploration program in order to solve that and really see what's out there. Alright, so that's basically it. We'll explain any more mods as we come along to them if we need to. For now, let's go ahead and grab some missions and get started. So we've got quite a few missions to choose from as we start. We've got some airplane missions here. We're going to work on those in a little bit, but as any good rocket agency, we should start with rockets. Here's our remote tech contracts. That's to create a communications network. We're going to need that soon enough, but not in this first episode. We don't need to just jump straight into satellites. We need to get to orbit first. But before we can even get to orbit, we should launch a vessel, leave the launch pad, do some science, and really kick this thing off. We're going to take both launch into the atmosphere contracts, and we only have 2 to do. I kind of wish I had taken this one, because this, all I had to do was create some science. I didn't even have to launch a vessel, so it would have been smarter to read just a little bit longer. I could have taken that contract first and done that first and foremost. But anyways, let's get back into the VAB and build our very first rocket. We don't have very many parts to choose from, so it's not really anything too complex. Thankfully, we have tweak scale, so I could take the very large wings and make them a little more reasonable for a rocket of this size. And we have a remote tech reflectron antenna here because we need to have signal in order to fly anything. We can't just rely on the probe core. To help with this, we have a mod called Antenna Helper, and that's going to help us plan what we need for our larger missions. We also have a mod that is out of date, but seems to work just well enough. It's just basically a calculator, and this calculates how much battery you're going to need around any given celestial body, and that will help you plan your missions a little bit better. But most importantly, it has this dark side calculator, which you can choose your celestial body, your apoapsis, periapsis, and it will tell you what kind of battery life you're going to need in order to stay alive for a full orbit. And obviously, if you have solar panels and that amount of batteries, then you're going to be able to stay powered indefinitely. So here you see, if we just crank up and put 8-way symmetry on those batteries, we now have enough to last one orbital period, excuse me. But we don't need that. We just need a couple batteries in order to transmit some science. But yeah, Ampere is going to be very helpful in larger missions. I skipped through putting the thermometers on there, but we put 2 thermometers because that is the only science we have available. And we don't actually need this to launch all the way up. We don't need all the fuel in it. If we turn down our thrust to weight ratio and limit the amount of fuel, we can burn for a short amount of time and barely leave the launch pad. However, we'll still qualify as having taken off in atmosphere. So I did many tests and found the sweet spot of where I want. Those figures were put on the screen right there. You can go back and pause it if you want to kind of replicate this attempt. As you see here, we have numbers in green, which means that we have connection to the KSC via remote tech, and we can toggle the throttle up and down, so we do have control, which is good. It's always important to remember an antenna, but when you're dealing with remote tech, it is mandatory. So let's go ahead and one more thing. Remote tech has this little green box next to it. That is the flight computer. I'm very happy to have the access to that again. It's been a little bit, but we'll explain that when we start using it. So let's do our first bit of science, a temperature scan right on the launch pad. And liftoff, we slowly go up, and since we are in the air, we were able to take another biome reading of the temperature. So there we go. We landed safely. Everything's intact. We're going to be able to recover the full funds of that launch as well as the science. So we're going to come back here. We've got 9.8 science. Not enough to unlock more than one node, really, since everything is 5. But we might as well unlock something. In the early game, you have to be kind of aggressive with your science spending because every new part will allow you to do something more. Like these side decouplers are very tempting because then we can add more stages to our rocket. It's only 5 points. Aviation is also very tempting because we're going to be able to do plane things. We're going to be able to do somewhat kind of rover things. We can collect science around the KSC, which will help. But ultimately, we're going to go with Engineering 101 because it gives you 2 extra science experiments, the onboard camera and the press mat barometer. And it's always wise to go for what gives you more science capabilities. We're also going to unlock the small parts node because if it's only one point, and why not? So let's go ahead and do that again, but with the new experiments. Once again, back on the launch pad, all I did was add 2 of the press mat barometers and 2 of the onboard cameras. So left the fuel and the thrust limiters the way that they are. So we're getting a good chunk of science from the barometer. However, if you notice on here, we don't get very much science from the onboard camera, and it looks like it could give us science, but it's not going to give us all of it. And that's because it requires multiple runnings to gather all the science required. So we're going to have to do quite a few of the onboard cameras. So we check to make sure we have connection. Once again, we lift off the surface and do all the science experiments available to us. We did miss out on being able to hit the thermometer. It flashed momentarily, so we might have been able to get another one, but that might have been a bug. Who knows? But for now, we've got 20.6 points of science, so we can do very well for ourselves. Survivability is going to be a big thing, because if we can get parachutes on our crafts, that means that we can bring them back safely to the surface, and we'll always get more science for retrieving the science rather than transmitting it. However, for the same amount of points, we can unlock all the other level 1 science, all the 5-point science. We can unlock all of those and move up. And like I said, these decouplers are very tempting. The aviation is all very tempting, and so I think we're going to go ahead and go for that. So we're going to unlock that. We're going to unlock basic rocketry, which gives us a liquid fuel engine as well as a bigger SRB. And we are going to unlock the structures that go along with the construction bit, as well as the aviation parts that go along with the aviation bit. So there we go. We grabbed the last of it, and that leaves us with 3.6 science. Not enough to do anything else, but it's we've got a lot of new parts to work with now, and that's good. As you see here, we still have this contract because we needed to launch our vessel over 1,000 meters, and obviously we only launched it a few meters. So we are going to have to launch a vessel pretty legitimately to complete that contract. So let's go ahead and get that vessel loaded back up, but we're going to adjust the thrust and the fuel back to a normal status, and we can go ahead and launch this. Turn the thrust all the way up, turn the fuel all the way up. We only have one experiment of each on this because we don't plan on recovering this rocket. I have a feeling it's going to go that direction because of the weight distribution of those experiments, which is good because hopefully we'll get a different biome than we're used to. And we're going to throttle up even though we don't need to. We're going to go ahead and launch, and immediately it starts pitching over in that direction that I had suspected. We do all of our science and transmit everything that we can. And if you notice in the top left corner, we now no longer have signal because we ran out of battery. So we were only able to do the experiment once, even though we passed over multiple biomes. So here it is, turning into a small missile. But thankfully, nobody was hanging out having a picnic on their lunch. But that solved the contract, so we can go back to the KSC and pick up some new ones. So here we are, we got 18.6 science, and that is just enough, just a little over enough to grab the survivability tab. And like I mentioned, that has the parachutes, which is going to make a huge difference in our science gains, because transmitting is good in a pinch, but not really feasible for the long run. So we have no more contracts, so we're going to go ahead and we want to pick up the next contract, but first let's build the craft, and let's see if we can even complete the contract. Before we grab them, let's see that we can have a craft capable. And the contract that we're going to be looking at is to break the Kármán line and peek ourselves into space. So we, if you're familiar with our series, we are building the Pinhole series of rockets, and that is just going to shoot straight up, do its science, and come back down. Now that we have survivability, we have access to a very small heat shield, so we are going to put our science experiments on this little truss and put some parachutes on that and a decoupler, so we're only going to retrieve this top part. Scooching that down, putting some batteries, and naming this the Pinhole 1. So we got a pretty decent thrust to weight ratio, so we should be fine. It has An antenna and its center of mass and center of lift are in the appropriate location, so I believe that is good to go. We did a test. It did successfully pass the Kármán line, so we're going to go ahead and pick up these 2 contracts. Once again, I wish that I had taken a little bit more time to look over the contracts, because we have this one right here that we can test some dynamite on the launch pad. We could have done that real fast before even bothering with the pinhole rocket, but that's okay. Just got to be better about looking at all the contracts in the future, because it matters what you do, because you can do so much more if you multitask your contracts. So anyways, here we are. We're on the launch pad. We've got the pinhole 1 ready to go. It doesn't need to do any science on the launch pad or even in atmosphere. This is solely going to try to get science from space. We throttle up because that is just habit. We don't need a throttle because these are all SRBs. But with a healthy thrust to weight ratio, it takes off pretty well. We're going to speed up the footage a little bit because this is as typical of a launch as any. Except for, of course, the high definition volumetric clouds and the 60 frames per second. I mean, both of those are quite new, quite good. I had to do quite a bit of editing magic to get my videos as viewable as they were. I know that as they weren't always that viewable, so I do appreciate all of you who have stuck around long enough for me to get to this point, and so I'm so glad to give you the game in real-time footage. So we burned out all of our SRB, and we are definitely going to make it past the Kármán line, so let's just go ahead and time warp our way up. I used to separate the stage as soon as the last stage burnt out, but I've learned that by keeping it connected, you can kind of maintain some of the... Oh, there we are. We completed our contract, and momentum. That was the word that I was going for. Keep some of your momentum. There we are. We do all of our science, which is now space science, which is much more valuable than anything on Kerbal will give us, so looking forward to a nice bounty when we get back. Let's go ahead and separate that, and we are going to time warp our way back into the atmosphere, and hopefully we can survive re-entry. It's beautiful seeing that. In the lower right hand corner you can see some of the storms going on. It seems like there's a lot of rain in that area. I can't wait till we can see the raindrops on our cockpit window in this glorious view. I can't get over how good this game looks. So thankfully the balance on our craft actually flips us around. So we end up going retrograde, which is exactly what we needed. And as quickly as it starts, the heat effects dissipate because this is a very small craft that didn't go very high into the atmosphere, and it seems to have a pretty decent trajectory. It's not coming in ballistically, meaning straight up and down. Pass by the cloud layer, and I know that at this point it's safe to pop our parachutes. We probably could have dropped a little bit lower since this weighs so little, but best to be safe rather than sorry. And that's how you end up getting situations like how we had in our last series, where we had gotten a whole crew to mid-miss, but the game didn't think we made it to orbit because we kept breaking our probes. So let's go ahead and get this thing down nice and safely. Beautiful. And it rights itself up and gets ready to send out the homing beacon, and the Kerbal Navy will come out and pick this up. Wonderful. Love when a mission comes together. Alright, so we have no more contracts. So we can pick up some more stuff, and kind of then we'll go into the R&D building and see what we want to focus on. So let's go ahead and grab this, test the explosives, because that's really just easy money. Just blow up a probe core and an antenna, and then we get paid for it. Nice and easy. So now we're going to pick up the last mission that we're going to do for this episode, and that is to fly a plane. This program is going to be also very heavy on planes and eventually on space planes, hopefully. And so we want to just go ahead and get started with that immediately. We also picked up a contract to test a Spider liquid fuel engine splashdown at Kerbin, and we're going to try to do both of those at the same time. Normally with the test and the splashdown on Kerbin missions, I just make a small rocket, launch it westward, or eastward, excuse me, and drop it off in the water. However, I think we could probably have some fun completing both these at the same time by making a plane that can drop a payload into the water, land safely, and then we can switch over to the control of that probe, and then complete the mission that way. So I think that's what we're going to kind of go for on this one. So we're going to build this plane, and we'll get back to you soon. I just love how easy it is to build planes in stock KSP. I mean, this isn't stock, but just not RP1. It's just so easy and convenient, and just drag and drop on all these pieces. It's very nice. Put on some static wheels because we don't have access to retractable ones. There you go. Our center of lift and center of mass is pretty good, so we don't have to worry about adjusting the aerodynamics very much. So let's go ahead and put Jeb in the cockpit and test it. Our test came back and it proved that it would be helpful if we put engines on the plane. It looks pretty on the runway, but it does not move. So let's go ahead and put some fuel tanks here, some small Juno engines there, and I'm trying to figure out where to put it, and it just accidentally goes on the wing, and I'm like, that kind of looks fun. I've seen space planes with engines on the wings, so we're going to go ahead and slap some air filters on there and go ahead and give it another test. Okay, engines on the wing is a bad idea. Bad idea, Jeb. So let's go ahead and put those under the wings like normal aircraft. Throw an antenna on here with a little solar panel, because why not, and give it another test. So everything went out well, and so we attached a small probe to the back, which will be our payload, and we loaded it all up on the runway, and Jeb is now going to be flying this for real. And our engines are activated, and they're spooling up. We're going to take a quick peek inside the cockpit. This isn't KSP POV, but that doesn't mean that we can't play in first person every now and then. So let's go ahead and turn everything on. And we get a warning light about our gear being unsafe, but there's nothing we can do about that because our gears are fixed. So we're not going to fly this mission from the cockpit because that sound is just dire. This is a pretty quick plane. It really likes taking off. It really wants to be in the air, so we're gonna just go ahead and let it. I am using my joystick for the first part of this flight. I have a Thrustmaster T1600 or 16,000, one of those two, and it's quite nice. It's nice to use it in this program to just get back into the swing of flying with it. However, I wasn't, it'd been a little bit, so I decided to switch over to mouse and keyboard, at least for the time being, until I can get a little bit more practice. But I do actually get some more practice, and we'll be flying by joystick soon enough. But now I'm going to climb a little bit higher, so that way I can give the probe enough room for the parachute to fully open. I also want to make sure that I am above the water. I'm not going to just drop this on the beach because that will be useless. And I think that's good enough. So let's double check our stage and go ahead and give it a drop. And we see that the parachute pops open immediately, which is very encouraging. And so hopefully that will catch and land safely in the water. And hopefully we'll be able to transfer control over to it, but it's not too far out. So when we land this plane, we can go ahead and switch over to that and complete that contract. So much fun to fly a plane with volumetric clouds, to actually see some depth to the sky. Eve has clouds too, and they're very very good clouds. Environmental visual enhancements. Eve, um, in fact, part of volumetric clouds includes Eve, but there's just something that's just a little extra about it. It's very very worth it. And we can see our probe is landing safely. It looked like our parachute was fully deployed, so that's nice. So it's our mission is completed. So it's time to just bring this plane down safely and bring Jeb home even safer. So we turn off our engines to go into a glide. We kind of pitch down to build up a little speed, which actually I don't think it builds up speed. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, or if I'm correct. Someone correct me if I'm correct. And tell me, is pitching down, that actually slows you down? Did in RP1. I don't know if that's just because of Ferrum Aerospace research, but we're just kind of turning this way and that to kill off a little bit of speed as well as line ourselves up a little bit better. Initially I thought landing on the runway would be good, but then I remembered that the runway is kind of crap until you upgrade it. It's just a dirt road, a little bumpy. So we're just going to play it safe and land next to the runway because, you know, the ground next to the runway is actually flatter and more stable. So go figure. Checking out our shadow to see how quickly we are descending. We're descending quite fast. We're probably going at over 100 meters per second right now, which is not ideal. Once we get action groups available, we'll be able to set up an action group to turn off the engines, which will help landing a little bit better. We can even set up an action group to reverse the thrust, which will also help landing, because we can come to a stop instead of having to use parachutes like this. And because I put the parachutes in the middle, it yanked my front up at the very last second and broke my tail, but that's fine because nothing of value was there either. And this is an RP1, so we're not going to have to recover the craft. We can just get our funds back as usual. Put Jeb on EVA so we can get an EVA report, get all the science we can possibly get. And our warning signal is still going off, so let's get out of that cockpit as soon as possible. Now we want to transfer our control over to the probe and test out that engine when it splashed down. Luckily, it was still in the air, coming down safely. However, it has no control. Our remote tech signal shows that it's in red, so we have no ability of testing this engine remotely. This probe is uncontrollable, and after doing some digging I found out that the antenna had ripped off when we separated the probe, and so this was just not going to work no matter what. We have to design a better payload, something that has an antenna that can survive the descent. So as it would be, this probe is dead in the water. So we'll have to come back to that mission in the next episode. As for now, I think we did pretty good. I think we had a pretty good start to our program. We did not make it into orbit. However, given the Unkerballed mod, that's going to be a lot harder than it is in any other series that we've played so far, RP1 excluded. But anyways, that's where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more KXP. If you did, please consider giving me a like, drop me a comment, let me know your thoughts, and I will see y'all in the next one. Take care.